Before the world knew her as Half Pint from Little House on the Prairie, Melissa Gilbert's story began in Los Angeles in 1964. Though not in the typical Hollywood way. She wasn't born into fame, she was brought into it. Adopted as an infant by actor and comedian Paul Gilbert and his wife Barbara Crane, Melissa's earliest moments were already wrapped in the world of lights, cameras, and scripts. Her adoptive parents weren't just entertainers, they were dreamers, the kind of people who saw art and storytelling as a way of life. Growing up in this environment, Melissa was surrounded by energy, creativity, and opportunity. While most kids were learning to ride bikes, she was learning what it meant to perform. Hollywood wasn't just a faraway fantasy, it was home. But that kind of upbringing came with its own set of pressures. From the start, Melissa had to learn how to navigate a world where success could be dazzling one moment and unforgiving the next. Still, even as a child, she carried a spark, a mix of curiosity and determination that hinted she was destined for something remarkable. Melissa Gilbert's path to stardom came early, and it came fast. At just 9 years old, she landed the role that would define her childhood and secure her place in television history. Laura Ingalls Wilder, on Little House on the Prairie. It was 1974 when America first met her as the spirited young girl nicknamed Half Pint by her on-screen father, played by Michael Landon. The show wasn't just entertainment, it was a cultural touchstone that celebrated faith, family, and resilience on the rugged American frontier. And right at its heart was Melissa, whose warmth and authenticity brought Laura to life in a way no one else could. Viewers didn't just watch her grow up on screen, they felt like they were growing up with her. Each episode revealed a depth of emotion rare in someone so young. Behind her innocent smile was a performer who could capture heartbreak, joy, and courage with honesty that felt real. The series ran for nearly a decade, shaping Melissa's identity as both a beloved child star and a serious actress. But while millions adored her as Laura, fame came with its own hidden challenges. The bright lights of Hollywood had a way of shining on success, but not always on the struggles that came with it. And for Melissa, those challenges were just beginning to unfold. When Little House on the Prairie finally ended, many wondered whether Melissa Gilbert could move beyond the role that made her famous. For some child stars, that transition marks the end of a career. But for Melissa, it was only the beginning. Determined to prove her depth as an actress, she sought out projects that challenged her emotionally and artistically. One of the first was The Miracle Worker, 1979, where she portrayed Helen Keller opposite Patty Duke, who played Anne Sullivan. It was a demanding role, both physically and emotionally, and it showed audiences a more mature side of Melissa. Just a few years later, she starred in Choices of the Heart, 1983, taking on the heartbreaking true story of missionary John Donovan, who was killed while serving in El Salvador. These performances revealed her ability to step into deeply human stories, ones filled with struggle, hope, and faith, and make them resonate with honesty. As she grew older, Melissa continued working steadily in television, appearing in series like Stand By Your Man and Sweet Justice, and guest starring across countless shows. She proved that her talent wasn't confined to her childhood fame. She could adapt, evolve, and keep her relevance in a fast-changing industry. But acting wasn't her only strength. Behind the camera and in leadership roles, Melissa was beginning to carve out an entirely new identity, one that would soon take her to the very center of Hollywood power. By the early 2000s, Melissa Gilbert had already spent most of her life in front of the camera. But now she was ready to step into a different spotlight, one that demanded leadership, courage, and a voice that could stand up for thousands. In 2001, she was elected president of the Screen Actors Guild, SAG, the largest labor union representing actors in the United States. For someone who had grown up in Hollywood, this wasn't just a new job. It was a full-circle moment. She had experienced firsthand the highs and lows of show business, and now she was fighting to make that world fairer for everyone who called it home. During her 4-year tenure, Melissa became known as a tough but compassionate advocate. She pushed for better contracts, stronger healthcare protections, and safeguards for performers navigating a rapidly changing industry, one increasingly shaped by digital media and studio consolidation. Many admired her for being unafraid to speak her mind, even when it meant challenging powerful studios. To her, acting wasn't just about fame. It was about integrity, respect, and survival in an unpredictable business. This chapter of her life revealed something deeper about Melissa Gilbert. She wasn't just the girl America had loved on Little House. She was a woman unafraid to lead, to question, and to demand fairness in an industry built on illusion. But while her professional confidence grew, her personal life was entering one of its most turbulent and revealing phases. A journey that would test her strength far beyond Hollywood boardrooms. After decades in front of the camera, Melissa Gilbert chose to turn the lens inward. For the first time, she opened up about her private battles and personal truths in her memoir Prairie, published in 2009. The book was raw, honest, and unfiltered, a far cry from the polished image Hollywood had once projected of her. In its pages, she spoke about the emotional cost of growing up under constant scrutiny, her struggles with addiction, and the long, winding road toward healing and self-acceptance. Fans who had known her as the bright-eyed Laura Ingalls discovered a woman who had endured heartbreak, pressure, and reinvention, and who had survived it all with courage. Her follow-up, My Prairie Cookbook, 2014, was something completely different but equally personal. It wasn't just a collection of recipes. It was a warm blend of family traditions, behind-the-scenes stories, and nostalgic moments from her Little House years. Through it, Melissa connected with fans in a way that felt intimate and genuine, like sitting down for a homemade meal with an old friend. By choosing to speak openly about her imperfections, Melissa became an advocate for authenticity. She showed that healing isn't about hiding the scars, it's about sharing them so others know they're not alone. Her vulnerability made her relatable, proving that behind the fame was a woman still learning, growing, and striving to live with honesty. But even as she shared her truth through words, her personal relationships, and the lessons they carried, would soon take center stage. Melissa Gilbert's love life has often reflected the same mix of passion, complexity, and resilience that defines her career. In 1988, she married actor Beau Brinkman, a man connected to Hollywood's famous Sheen Estevez family. Their relationship burned bright and fast, full of creativity, shared ambition, and the unpredictable energy that often comes with two artists living under one roof. A year later, they welcomed their son, Dakota Paul Brinkman, bringing new purpose and joy into Melissa's life. But fame and family life rarely blend easily. Between career pressures and personal struggles, the marriage began to fracture, and after 6 years together, they divorced in 1994. The separation was painful, yet it became a moment of self-reflection, a lesson in love, independence, and the limits of endurance. Just a year later, Melissa found herself drawn back into romance, this time with actor Bruce Boxleitner, best known for Scarecrow and Mrs. King and Tron. Their love story was one of second chances, two seasoned actors finding connection through mutual respect and shared experience. They married in 1995, blending their families and welcoming a son, Michael Garrett Boxleitner, named after Melissa's beloved mentor, Michael Landon. For more than 16 years, they built a life together, balancing parenthood and Hollywood careers, until eventually parting ways in 2011. Through both marriages, Melissa learned that love in the public eye is rarely simple. Yet she never gave up on the idea of connection, and her next chapter would prove that sometimes the third act of life brings the kind of love that feels truly right. After decades spent in the constant glare of cameras, Melissa Gilbert finally chose something Hollywood rarely offers: peace. In 2013, she married actor and director Timothy Busfield, known for his roles in The West Wing and Field of Dreams. Their relationship felt different from the start, grounded, authentic, and built on mutual respect rather than fame. Together, they made a life-changing decision: to leave Los Angeles behind. The couple settled in the small town of Howell, Michigan, trading red carpets for quiet mornings, big studios for old wood floors, and celebrity events for community gatherings. Melissa described those years as a kind of emotional reset. She found joy in simple things: gardening, renovating a Victorian house, connecting with neighbors, and rediscovering herself away from the noise of Hollywood. For the first time in years, she wasn't performing for anyone. She was just living. This slower pace allowed her to focus on writing, political activism, and personal wellness, all while building a deeper connection with her husband. But after 5 peaceful years in Michigan, the pull of creativity brought them back to the city lights. This time, to New York City in 2018. For Melissa, the move wasn't a return to chaos, but a homecoming of inspiration. Surrounded by art, theater, and culture, she found a balance between her need for simplicity and her love for storytelling. It was a fresh chapter, proof that sometimes peace isn't found in escaping the world, but in learning how to live in it on your own terms. At 61 years old, Melissa Gilbert decided to share something she had held close for decades: her true feelings about her longtime colleague and mentor, Patty Duke. The two first worked together when Melissa played Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker and Patty portrayed Anne Sullivan, the teacher who guided her. It was more than just a film pairing. It was an emotional exchange between two women who understood what it meant to grow up under the unrelenting pressures of fame. For years, Melissa had spoken only sparingly about that connection. But now, with age and clarity, she was ready to reveal the depth of her admiration and the pain that often shadowed Patty's brilliance. In interviews and reflections, Melissa called Duke one of the most fearless actresses I've ever seen. She remembered how Patty could expose a character's soul on screen with a vulnerability that was both mesmerizing and unsettling. For the young Melissa, it was both inspiring and intimidating to watch someone act with such raw honesty. It set a standard, a kind of emotional truth she would strive to bring into her own work. Yet beneath that talent, Melissa also recognized something else: the quiet turmoil that often followed child stars into adulthood. Her decision to finally speak openly about Patty wasn't just a tribute, it was an acknowledgement of the shared struggles that defined their lives. For Melissa, telling this story wasn't about gossip or nostalgia. It was about truth, the kind that takes a lifetime to find the courage to say out loud. As Melissa Gilbert reflected on her bond with Patty Duke, what stood out most wasn't just the admiration, it was the understanding. When she was young, she saw Patty as moody, intense, and unpredictable. Only later did she realize that those traits were signs of a much deeper battle. Patty Duke had lived through the kind of pain that few could comprehend: early fame, manipulation, and the lifelong fight with bipolar disorder that she later had the courage to speak about publicly. For Melissa, that honesty became a revelation. It showed that even in Hollywood, a world built on perfection, there was strength in admitting your imperfections. Gilbert explained that Patty's decision to be open about her mental health gave countless others, including herself, the bravery to speak about their own vulnerabilities without shame. As Melissa looked back on her own life, the divorces, the addiction, the constant pressure to appear strong, she began to see reflections of Patty's journey in her own. "There were times," she said, "when I felt like I was walking that same edge." Watching Patty survive her darkest moments gave Melissa the resolve to take control of her own story before it controlled her. In Duke's life, Melissa found both a warning and a beacon, a reminder that pain doesn't have to destroy you if you can transform it into truth. Patty's legacy wasn't just her talent, it was her transparency. And for Melissa Gilbert, that lesson would become one of the defining truths of her own life and career. In the end, Melissa Gilbert's reflections on Patty Duke became more than a tribute. They became a mirror of her own growth. She spoke not as a fan or co-star, but as a woman who had finally made peace with the complexity of fame, pain, and survival. What moved her most about Patty wasn't just her artistry, but her humanity. She was a person who wanted love, stability, and peace, Melissa said, just like the rest of us. That simple truth, that behind the fame and applause lived a fragile, searching soul, resonated deeply with Melissa. It reminded her that being in the public eye doesn't erase the need for compassion. At 61, Melissa understood that telling the truth isn't always glamorous, but it's powerful. Her words carried the weight of someone who had lived through every side of Hollywood, the spotlight, the silence, and the struggle. By speaking openly about Patty's pain, and her own, she offered something rare in a world obsessed with image: empathy. She believed that our struggles don't define us, they shape us, and by sharing them, we give others permission to heal. Through her honesty, Melissa showed that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it speaks softly, through reflection and compassion. In finally telling her truth about Patty Duke, she not only honored a friend, but reminded us all that vulnerability can be the most powerful legacy of all.